On Friday, I proposed to my girlfriend and she said yes, so I'm now engaged to be married.
Congrats, dude. Make some white babies for us, will ya?
And thanks for stopping by.
But mainly, stay classy.
Thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy, I'm Ron Burgundy.
Thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.
That charming man you heard at the beginning was Snake is Ninja. He was the first person to make a response video attempting to answer my challenge to the YouTube Christian community. My question was, what beneficial aspects of religion can't be replaced by secular means? I do have a backlog of video responses I need to get through. I've watched all of the ones I'm aware of, and likely won't answer them all, especially ones that cover the same ground. Please keep in mind that I don't do this full time, so my time is limited, but I'll answer some of them and I'll watch all of them. Let's see what else Snake has to say.
The most important thing is ultimately the foundation of our concept of value. The issue of objective value is a priority to a healthy society. Value is what enables us to make choices. We determine what course of action we should take based on what we value.
Okay, so I distinctly remember laying out 3 ground rules, one of which was to deal in specifics. Here's what I said. 1. I'm looking for specifics. Saying something like, the culture, isn't helpful. What parts of that culture specifically? Saying something like, the values, could mean pretty much anything. What value do we get from a Christian worldview that we can't get from a secular one? And why would that value be preferable to a secular alternative? And hey, maybe you'll get to that soon. Fingers crossed.
If we value nothing, the choice does not matter. If we value fleeting emotions or pure self-interest, then we will choose accordingly. For that reason, the issue of value is the first issue before all others. One reason why Christianity is important, whether you personally believe in God or not, is that it motivates people to strive to accomplish goals and make personal sacrifices.
Okay, so what goal or sacrifice would a Christian make that a secular person couldn't or wouldn't make? And how would this ill-defined sacrifice benefit society? I'm also not sure who would or could value nothing. Everyone values something. Family, food, shelter, friends, and so forth. Christianity isn't needed in order to value these things. In fact, I'd argue that in some cases, Christianity could harm those values because you might be taught that chasing an afterlife or pleasing an immaterial God no one has good evidence for is more important or valuable than real-world people and issues. So again, what values are you talking about specifically?
Thus, it is reasonable to be concerned about Christianity if you're concerned about the long-term survival of the West. There's no way around it. Like it or not, religion is an insanely practical utility for maintaining a stable civilization.
Sure, you could make the argument that it has acted as a utility up until this point, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the most practical or the best way of maintaining a civil society. Like I have in other videos, I would argue that the less religious countries, which ironically happen to be in the West, are also some of the happiest and most prosperous places to live. Their standard of living is certainly much higher than the theocracies that currently exist, or even the theocracies that were present in the past. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is wholly due to secularization or the loss of religion, but it certainly does show that religion isn't needed in order to fashion and maintain a prosperous society.
This is why every major civilization in history has had religion at its core. In a previous video, you asked us to imagine a world where all the money spent on religion went toward humanitarian aid or medical research. If there is no objective value in anything, including either humanitarian aid or medical research, then why spend the money on those things?
I really don't understand how religious people, some of them anyways, don't understand that you don't need objective morality to act ethically. I really don't. There are objective facts associated with humanitarian aid. For example, if you feed starving people, you can witness the objective results. Less people being hungry, likely a more stable and prosperous society, etc. Now, why should or would we value that? Should we only value that because a deity told us to value it? Should we only value it in order to secure a place in a non-existent spiritual realm? Or could we maybe think of other reasons to value that action? For example, I would rather live in a country with some sort of social safety net. After all, there's no guarantee that at some point in my life, I might be the one in need of food. Maybe I have family or friends who are going hungry. Or maybe I can empathize with their situation and decide that I would rather live in a world where less people are starving to death. There are very practical, subjective reasons that are based on objective facts that we can base these decisions on. There is no need for a creator or superbeing to demand this of us in order for some, probably most, of us to reach the conclusion that starving bad, fed people good. Now, maybe a sociopath who is incapable of empathy might need this deity in order to act ethically. I don't know. But most people don't. We can use moral reasoning to figure out ethics. That doesn't mean we'll always hit the mark, or that there aren't ethical concerns that aren't as cut and dry as whether or not we should feed more people, but it is possible to subjectively reason about these ethical quandaries. I would also argue that your religion isn't true. The people who wrote your book of myths also used the knowledge they had available to them to create moral or ethical laws. That means you're following their moral judgments, their subjective moral judgments. The difference being, we know more today than they did back then, making us able to bring new facts to the table when discussing these ethical questions.
It may seem like a no-brainer that these things are good, right, or something people should pursue.
You're right, it does seem like a no-brainer.
But all of this breaks down without a foundation of value. Why?
Right, but are you saying there are no secular moral systems that also have a foundation? Something like secular humanism, for example, far outstrips Christian ethics, in my opinion. I'd argue that secular ethics outstrips religious ones in every conceivable way. Religion often has to bend to the reasons that secular ethics demand of them. Religious people and institutions are forced to reinterpret their religion in order to fit in with the changing societies they reside in. Sure, the religious kick and scream about it. They often slow such progress down, but eventually they adapt.
Why is it good to try to help other people who are sick get better?
I've already answered that. Just substitute the starving person with a sick person. I mean, there's more to it than what I offered, but the reasons I gave are far more reasonable and practical than God said so. And frankly, it makes me wonder about the character of people who can't figure this stuff out on their own. It's not like you're arguing about a particularly difficult ethical issue. This stuff is pretty cut and dry. It's obvious to most people. People with and without belief in a God. Why we should help the sick.
You have to articulate why. This presupposes two things. One, that there are things which are objectively good.
No, like I explained before, there are objective realities or consequences that can be obtained through a particular action. We subjectively decide whether these objective realities are good or bad. Without a subject, a real conscious entity or person, nothing means anything. You need consciousness in order for ethical concerns to matter at all. It really sounds like you would rather just be told what to do, rather than actually think about these issues for yourself.
2, human life is objectively good, and thus we should save it whenever possible.
If there were no subjects or people to value human life, our lives, which wouldn't exist anyway, would have no value. If we were all zombie people without consciousness, no one would be around to value our lives. Machines don't value their existence. We value our existence subjectively. Everything we can observe about human civilization now and in the past shows us that morality is subjective. We see different laws, different rules, different customs around the world, precisely because it is subjective. That doesn't mean we can't make objective observations pertaining to the consequences of those customs, laws, etc.
You can't presuppose these without placing your faith in these abstract ethical principles. What about individualism, liberalism, or human rights? What is your secular rationale for these concepts?
I've pretty much explained it already.
It all becomes a matter of opinion, which can easily be rejected if your opponent has a different opinion. Christianity is a known entity. It asserts things.
Sure, it asserts a lot of things that are untrue and for which there is no good evidence for. You've got the asserts thing right, anyhow.
It has been put into practice in hundreds of countries throughout the centuries. Secularism is very new. It is still very unknown as an entity.
Sure, and so far secular countries are where you want to live. It has achieved more in a short time than religious theocracies have achieved over a long period of time. So again, what specific values does Christianity promote that we can't achieve from a secular perspective? And why are they valuable?
The closest thing we have to secular societies are communist societies. Now, obviously, you will assert that the modern West is secular.
I wouldn't have to assert, that's just the truth. The modern West is secular for the most part. I mean, you could argue that, say, Britain isn't strictly secular because of the Church of England and the enormous privileges it currently enjoys, but for all intents and purposes, the West is secular in nature. They certainly aren't theocracies. By the way, I love how you snuck in that communist boogeyman.
While it is true that the modern West is quickly becoming more and more secular, in practice, there is still a large component of religious belief, specifically of Christian belief, in the West.
Yes, lots of people believe silly things on insufficient evidence. That doesn't mean it's beneficial or that it's the best way to go.
And the trend that the West is becoming more secular may not be a long-term trend. The trend that religion, that Christianity is dying in the West, may not be a long-term trend.
You're right, it might not be. Not sure why this would matter to the discussion. I certainly hope the trend continues. I also hope that the Islamic world, for example, eventually enjoys the same trend in the future.
Furthermore, Western countries that are around today, like the United States, have a long history of Christianity, of religious belief. Hundreds of years of history in which these countries were largely religious, which stretches all the way back to Britain and to Europe, in which we've seen thousands of years of Christianity. And before then, other religions, which go back, presumably, to the dawn of man.
Cool. Time for that to end. We no longer need to use ancient superstitious dogma in order to prop up our societies. You've yet to offer a compelling reason why I shouldn't think this. You haven't even come close to answering the question I asked of the Christian community on YouTube.
As long as man has been around, religion has been around.
As long as man has been around, rape has been around. Let's just let rape happen then. It's a silly line of logic in that context, and it's silly in yours as well. Just because something has been around for a long time doesn't mean it needs to stay around, or even that it's necessarily the most efficient way of doing something. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks to Snake is Ninja for attempting to answer my challenge. It's appreciated. I got 5 video responses so far. A few I likely won't respond to, but I'll try to get to some of them in the near future. Take care and cheers.